Welcome to Esoteric America, a podcast where we tour the strange, mystical, and esoteric pathways hidden beneath the surface of America. Join Mark, Tara, Roman, Chad, and a new local researcher each episode as we dive into our country's diverse regions, states, counties, cities, towns, neighborhoods, parks, etc., leaving no stone unturned as we unravel the cult knots that tie history, culture, religion, all in with fringe elements that you may not have realized were at play in your own backyard. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Esoteric America. Here we are again, and we've got a very special guest. The gang is all here, and this person is someone who, I'll just say, frankly, inspired this show. So the Susquehanna alchemist himself has finally made his debut on Esoteric America, and we couldn't be more thrilled. Michael Wann, welcome to the show, brother. We've done tons of podcasts together, but, you know, this is a special one for me because your work, your research, it really opened my eyes, and I think a lot of people's eyes, to this esoteric America that we're living in. So without further ado, let's start the show. I'm glad to have you here. Roman, what are your thoughts before I just take it away? You got anything you want to add in the intro?
I don't think we'd be here. Sorry, Roman. I just wanted to say this. I don't think we'd be here if it wasn't for Mike, honestly. So I'm so grateful for you. Yeah, there we
go. That's a humbling way to be introduced, and Roman, we're gonna get to you. True. Because you were mid sentence, and then Tara just jumped in, and I'm jumping in, but we're gonna get back to you. Thank you for saying that, Mark.
Let's get wild.
I'm excited to be here because I remember when you first were telling me about this show as an idea. I was like, wow, that sounds fantastic. And I think this is going to be great. I love talking to people who I'm going to add or tweak a word you said. You said a research, and it's not research. It's an approach to life. And we can see it through research, but research is how we know what we're doing. So that's kind of what I'm going to want to be talking about today. Great to see all three of you, and Roman, now on to you, my brother.
I like that. Yeah, the way a way of life, like a way to chorus your vision to see things in a grander way, or to encapsulate what you're seeing and feeling and interpreting that. And I think that's going to be a great avenue for people to try to go down when they're looking into their towns, looking in their cities, which things that we're avidly trying to encourage here on the show. Yeah. I just wanted to say, I mean, you know, he said, is there anything I want to mention before we get going on the show? And it is that it's a pleasure to be here again with you, Mike. We chatted with you and Ross on Rising from the Ashes, and that was like almost a 4-hour episode because we had chatted with Ross for like 2 hours, and then you jumped in. You're like, you guys still here? And I was just like, yeah. And we went on for like another hour and a half, and it was awesome. Yeah, it's always a pleasure. We've been waiting to and yearning to do a show with you here because of your research, or sorry, the stuff. It has been a huge foundational cornerstone laid to this idea of Esoteric America as a show. So we've been waiting, and you've been all around the map so far. We didn't know if we was going to be talking about Florida or whatever, but we have some mysteries here.
Yeah, yes, I'm glad you said that, Roman, because on that note, we kind of let Mike take the reins here as far as what we're going to be talking about. And normally we focus on one place, but I think with a guest like Mike, we're going to sort of do a little freestyle episode, but eventually get to Harrisburg. Or we'll start with Harrisburg and sort of give the background. It's up to you, Mike.
Well, how about this? Roman said something which I want to expand upon, and you're talking about a way which we could see life, like describing what you're calling Esoteric America is a program which is encouraging and delves into just human beings looking at their surroundings from maybe a new perspective. And I'm going to suggest that the perspective which we're doing is more of like the way we would perceive reality if we did not go through the intense indoctrination of like, that's what the whole culture and specifically education is about. It's like literally it is to have everybody see reality from the same perspective. Like, we all have the same units of measure. And certainly I suppose you could go and say like there's a benefit for everyone being on the same page. Yes. But the flip side, which is not discussed, is that phenomena, anything outside of oneself is like, it kind of comes into our senses and then we're like, we define it this way. And the ways are not only are they uniform across the board, but they are also they're devoid of natural reality. That's why it requires so much training. And so what we're doing and what we'll do today in the show from a couple different ways is we're learning how to see things kind of as they are. And it begins by like looking at the things you've always overlooked. Whether that's like a strange building or a strange history of where you've been from, or a natural feature which has always been there, but because no one ever told you to look at it, you never look at it because there wasn't a historical marker that told you to look here. So it's beginning to like kind of like free yourself or to look at things differently. And where I think we're going to go with the show today, or where I hope to, is that the practice of doing the research, like, so research is really like, your gym work, you're building the mental muscle so that then you can just start interacting with reality and interpreting it from a completely natural way. And so the last thing I want to say is they kind of describe this, or to give an example, a more concrete example of what I was just describing. And Mark, you and I have discussed this countless of times, but there used to be a way of categorizing or understanding the natural world or the world of phenomena from just like a common sense perspective. Like, we're going to slice and dice things and like categorizing it, but the categorizations were done in a very intuitive way. And that was this technique.
That's like half, right? Isn't that like half of it?
Well, yeah, yes. But I'm just giving the example. So it was called the signature of doctrines. And so you would look around reality and you just look at things that seemingly look alike. It's just that simple. And you're like, oh, like the most common example nowadays with the signature of doctrines is like when you see food that looks like a certain organ in the body, it's good for that organ in the body. Like, that's what I mean. Like, what you see is what you get. You don't need to go to any sort of specialized training to know that when you do a cross section of a carrot, you're like, hey, that looks like an eye.
Yeah.
Or like, and so that was the way in which people understood reality. They would see it and you would make common sense. So we have a classification system right now, like the genus system, where all of the animals and plant life are categorized in all of these like Latin ways. And there's certain rules and logic of why something is in one category and something's in another category. So that's not intuitive. That is, you got to go and get specialized training, and that specialized training, it shapes consciousness, like bigger than just like learning the system. You are training your mind to see in a certain way, and that spills over to everything. So the indoctrination process of like just going through regular school by learning like the first thing they teach you, the days of the week, and to see reality a certain way, and everyone's seeing reality that certain way, you're like, okay, this is all there is. But when you do what we're doing here and we begin to like back into it, like other ways of seeing things, we're learning how to go and see the ways and understand the ways which people always did. And that was always something that was common sense based. So there's no real like PhD from some esoteric university. You don't need to go and study underneath like, you know, some master. Like, you just need to forget all the bullshit which they told you how to see reality.
Right. Right, and this is the great opportunity that we have with this show and all the podcasts that engage in this kind of open dialogue. So let's get going into it. I appreciate that.
Tara was going to say something, and I cut off. I'm sorry, Tara. What were you going to say about that's half of it?
Oh, because I like what I really loved about the way you live is how you live was very similar to the way that I lived when I was traveling around, except I didn't get heavy into the research at that time, but anyway, I really like it because, and what I really love about what I think this show does is that people like can just like, I guess it was just saying the same thing you were saying in a different way, but like how it just live their lives and like life could be more fluid. And like going to work every day and like having different just walking around the neighborhood and whatever lights up your heart in that moment, then you go and do research about it and follow the threads.
I know what's teaching you.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But like what we're kind of teaching here now, I guess, in a way.
All right, where are we going, Mark?
Well, I think we should let you take the lead. I think that was a great way to start. And yeah, it's not about going and studying all these different books. Sure, books can help, but I think the intuition is the primary engine for this kind of discovery, this curiosity that we feel that leads us to explore and you know, these novel, unique, synchronous experiences that always reveal what tends to be just waiting to be found, what's often unseen.
I would say it's deeper than that. It is like, it's an approach to life, and what you're doing is, we're always part of life, but we've been indoctrinated and we've been encouraged to live our life with the feedback loop from culture. And so like, you live your life, you understand your life based upon the rules of culture. And there's always going to be a feedback loop, no matter like how you live. It's just where and how you're putting your attention. So we're going outside of the culture, we're even going through the culture, but we're creating a feedback loop with life itself. And it is mirrored by synchronicity. But it's like synchronicity is always there. It's like, you know, we're just like, we're developing that muscle. And so what I think is going to be fun, Roman said to me right before we started recording, he was like, oh, I was looking into Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That's where I'm physically at this moment. And he like some things caught his attention. And I'm pretty familiar with Harrisburg along the line just because of the Susquehanna stuff, but by no means am I an expert. But I think that like the things that caught your attention, Roman, it's going to spill over into a conversation right now, which we're not prepared for, or we did not like do preparation for this. And we're going to demonstrate kind of like the feedback loops, which life is always giving us when we start paying attention into something deeper than the cultural narrative.
Oh, well, that's beautiful, deep and heavy. But I guess that's what it needs to be when you're ripping off the Band-Aid of indoctrination, right? It needs to be a little bit stingy, a little bit sharp, to expose that wound to the sun, to let the natural Band-Aid come and go. One of the things that
fun. I've never felt a sting. So
numb.
You mentioned to me about a cave system and a mall.
Yes.
And it's perfect because we talked about culture and going deep, and you could go and link that in right now because that's how our conversation began off air.
Okay, so here's what I found, and it was quite fascinating because tunnels and caves go back to all of the ancient mysteries of mythologies, dating all the way back to Sumerian and, heavily in Greek, right? Like there's this vitriol substance within the center of the earth. And so there's a lot of ancient mysteries that tie to cave systems. So anytime I see cave or tunnel, I'm like, yes, I'm going there. I'm a splunkerer. Desplunkering. What was that called?
The person who goes in the caves.
Yes.
Spelunking.
Spelunking, that's it. Our neighbor does that.
Spelunking. I'm a spelunkerer. And so was cruising upon the interwebs, and I saw that there was a cave, famous cave underneath the Harrisburg Mall. So after doing further research, I found out that this cave system stems all the way up from Canada, going down into Kentucky and even further south. And what we know about Kentucky and the mammoth caves there, the huge tunnel systems, I found that to be fascinating. I'm not really surprised that there's more hidden tunnel systems that aren't just like normally talked about, because it doesn't seem to just strike the key of fascination upon the mainstream narrative for whatever reason, even though it's fascinating to think about caves and just what's going on underneath our feet. But this cave is special because it was a limestone quarry, and it was full of different types of crystals. And they even called it, it had the name of Crystal Paradise. So it was called Crystal Cave or Crystal Paradise. And at some point in history, around in the 60s, they said, you know what, this is great. This could be a cool tourist attraction, but what would be even better is to build a mall on top of it. So they did that. They headlined it.
Even better tourist attraction.
I bet, like for whatever type of societal situation they want to involve themselves in to make more money, they said a mall can do it. So they dynamited the cave, and they closed it off to fill it in and create more foundational structure for the mall to be built there. And, what we know about limestone and what we know about, crystals and their conductive and magnetic potentiality is huge, right? So that means that there is something very special happening and permeating from like the electromagnetic frequencies stemming from the Earth's beautiful core here in Harrisburg.
Well, without a doubt. Before I go into that, Mark, do you have any comments? Mark or Tara?
I'm just curious what sort of, now I'm just curious about Harrisburg.
And what does it feel like there? Does it feel,
yeah,
is there a high energy there? Is it pretty chill?
So
what's the vibe like?
I've been there.
Pennsylvania and Harrisburg, and I'm going to begin with this. So this is something which is kind of like I think it's both statistically proven, but it's also urban myth, which is all of these people, like, maybe later in life, in their 30s, older, who grew up in this area. And they're like, the first moment I had the opportunity to get the F out of Dodge, I did. And for whatever reason, it keeps pulling me back. And that's like it's almost a trope around here. Like, I don't know why I'm here. I'm not happy that I'm here, but I can't get it out. I can't get away. So to me, that is, I think, maybe a bit of the indication of what the energy is like here. Like it's
Yeah.
like so if you look at Pennsylvania from and you look at the motto of Pennsylvania, it's called the Keystone State. And so all the things which are like, mottos of states and anything like that is typically traced back to some sort of Masonic connection, like all of the official structures. So the very fact that Pennsylvania has as its motto Keystone State, which is such a rich Masonic word, like the entire governmental system is Freemasonic. And so when you look at the Freemasonic symbol set applied to a supposedly non-Freemasonic application, like when you see that happens, you're like, okay, I know there's something going on. And the keystone in what's called operative masonry, so like actual Freemasons, like people working with stone, like that's where the Freemasonry speculative secret society fraternity, it gets its at least mythological roots from that. Within operative masonry, the biggest secret of the guild in the Middle Ages was the secret of the keystone, because that's how you make an arch. And it's like the keystone holds it all together. It's the stone that the builder rejected because it looks different than all the other ones. And if you look at that metaphorically, because that's what everything is in Freemasonry, is it's symbolic, like the keystone is what holds it all together. It's the secret which we're protecting the most. It's the one which is hiding right in front of you. The secret of all
Central
of Freemasonry or of masonry was the keystone, which was the most obvious thing in any archway, which was supposedly their secret. It's always hiding in your face. So we ascertain, we're like, well, if you're calling this a Keystone State, and this is like it's a government thing, so it's Masonic. What's the mystery?
Yeah.
What's the history here? And I started thinking that way, like when I began looking at the Susquehanna River. And so that's always been in my mind. And I'm familiar with Harrisburg. This is the most time I've ever spent. I'm in a house sitting situation. I've been here for almost 10 days. And so this is the longest I've ever been in Harrisburg. It doesn't feel, well, two things. One, it doesn't feel like anything particularly enriching, nurturing. It definitely doesn't have that. But that's coupled with the fact that everything that was here naturally, and this is true for a lot of places, but it's as you described, they blew it up with dynamite and they put a shopping mall on top of it. Yeah. They did that. This is where 3 Mile Island is. 3 Mile Island is like a handful of miles from this Harrisburg mall. 3 Mile Island being the notorious.
What are the cafes like?
I mean, it's like it's there's a certain trend,
which that's how
which is all around the country, as there's like a throwback to boutique coffee places and stuff like that. And like, yeah, this place has it. It has national trends, but I haven't found my favorite here.
is that
She,
what's like the reason why I ask that is because usually where people gather, you get a good feel for what the town is like.
Yes. One of the things I picked up from you and Mark was having certain, as I travel from town to town, there's certain things I go and look at in every town to kind of like gather, like get the pulse of what it is. And so from you guys, I got used bookstores. I go
yep.
to thrift shops, I go to coffee shops, and then like a local natural grocer.
Yeah.
And between those four, like I get a pretty good indication.
Yes.
There's
First stops in
definitely
any new town are all four of those things.
you go and you
100%.
find those and you're like, okay, like what's particularly the thrift stores, you see what the people are getting rid of, you definitely get a feel. There's a very strong like metaphysical community in Harrisburg, like larger than what I think most people would anticipate. My work is particularly well received here. Like I've had personal experiences have been nothing but like enjoyable, but as like the energy of the area, like it's, other than the fact that I like the people, it doesn't necessarily, well, let me go with this. I am more confused by the highways in Harrisburg, and it's not a big town, than I am in almost any other place I've been to. And so maybe that could be an indication of how I'm picking up the energy is like, I don't really have my bearings. Like I get confused on the roads. Like I've taken this like 6 times. It still doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I remember driving through Harrisburg and feeling like it was, kind of your classic former factory kind of area where, the Rust Belt, as it's called. But yeah, it was very interesting. Like the Susquehanna River has and I wonder if this is why this metaphysical community gravitates there. But I feel like the river has like a pull there in Harrisburg, and it bends there as well, right? Isn't the river bend kind of?
Yeah, there is a bend here. The big bend I've made reference to is right on the 40th parallel,
Right.
which is maybe like 20 miles downstream. But to Roman's point, like, yeah, this cave goes right through here. The river goes right through here. I didn't finish my point about the Keystone. I got off track. Harrisburg's the capital of Pennsylvania. So it's not just like a Rust Belt town. Like it's the state capital. It's like there is embedded into the infrastructure of how this town works is like there's always going to be the state capital here, and then all of the byproducts that come from that. There's a big naval operational center here. Like I see it on the signs. That has me confused because like the Susquehanna River goes through here, but the Susquehanna River is famous for being non-navigable. It's only 9 feet deep and it can't be dredged because it's got a rock solid bottom. But there's a very strong military presence here. Harrisburg has an international airport, which is a little bit surprising due to like the population size. But the reason it has an international airport and what qualifies for an international airport is the length of a runway. You need a really long runway to be an international. And so they have that here because this was a major, it was once like a major military Air Force. It was a base. That's why it has that long runway on it. So you can look at a lot of the indications of culture and the state house for Pennsylvania is another one of these like really remarkable. I mean, they probably all are, but it's a really remarkable architectural building. I had a good friend maybe about 2 years ago who would just go into the state Capitol building, and would start asking questions. He would demand to speak to like someone who would know. And the sort of questions he would ask, he's like, you say that this building was built in 1847, but none of these things were available in 1847. Can you prove that this was done? Do you have architecture? Do you have blueprints? He would ask them all of these questions, and no one could ever answer any of the questions. He was
It doesn't
on a
exist.
mission. So there's all these like indications of like of a disruption or a dirtying or a polluting of the natural energies in which Roman hinted at. Like, this is an example of like the research which you do, like you're juxtaposing what's before you. If you find out like there's this big old cave that's going right through the state capitol, and then you look at some of the other things that just kind of like look out of sorts, well, then, you know, you put one and one together and you start to be able to ascertain what's going on, so you can begin to become more clear maybe what to look for. So let me go and tell this one last story, and then I'll stop speaking for a moment. So me and my partner, Christy, were here for like 2 weeks, and we had arranged to do a handful of like ceremonies and events, like presentations while we're here. And we've been doing the ceremony which we do. We travel all around and we replicate this ceremony over and over again. It's called the River and Stars ceremony. So the stars element is like we build the on the starboard what is in the configuration of the heavens at the moment of the ceremony. And then we bring the Susquehanna River water with us, and we do like some water stuff. But these ceremonies are ultimately about like what's symbolic of like the heavens and the underworld, you know, another one of these like cave metaphors. Like, what exactly is the underworld? That's rhetorical because it's too big of a question. But anyway, we've been thinking, and we've been doing the Susquehanna stuff outside of the Susquehanna. So it was good to come back like and do something here in Camp Hill or in Harrisburg. And we're doing this like heavens and underworld, river and stars type of ceremony. So we come into this house, and we are right on one of the larger creeks that empties into the Susquehanna River. We're probably like a mile from where this creek, which is 20 feet across, empties out. Like, we're right on this water system. And in preparation for the ceremonies, I was just kind of like thinking in my mind, like, you know, what it means to be back here and share like maybe some, you know, just share some information. And what had been new is thinking about the Susquehanna River as a symbol of the underworld, just as like, you know, the river Styx or a lot of these other mythical rivers that are always tied to the underworld. I'm like, if there's an underworld river, it's the world's oldest river. Like, that just made sense to me. So I'm like, we're at the underworld, we're at the crossing, all these sort of things. So I brought that like in my field, in my consciousness, in the way which I am communicating with the environment. We're never not communicating, but I know that what at least what I'm putting out there on that deeper level. So we arrive here, and house sitting is primarily really it's a pet sitting situation. Like, people want you to house sit because they want you to care for their pets. Mm-hmm. And we arrive here, and I was telling you about this, Mark. There are these two Rottweilers, and maybe you would have heard them growling in the background when we started recording. They've calmed down since then. And they're just like these like aggressive big dogs, and they were quite aggressive to us, like at least the first 24 hours. They can snap at any given moment. But the point, and where I'm going with all this, and where I'm going to circle this back in, is all of the mythologies or deal with, not all of them, but the Egyptian, the Greek mythologies, they talk about a multi-headed dog aggressive dog that guards the underworld, your entrance to the underworld. And so as I've been like kind of like preparing myself to go into the underworld here, and we're on it, we are met literally with these dogs. And so as I have this in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is really happening. Like, you know, if this is all a dream, like this is giving me real feedback mechanism. And so now I know, because I love animals. And like, you know, I think it's a real indication of the energy of a person, of how the natural world, like, I don't mean this in a judgmental way, but in a literal way, how's the natural world responding to your energy? I'm like, okay, I'm with these aggressive dogs. I need to be able to meet them in a way where like we find a healthy dynamic, a balance point. And so in my mind, like, and this goes into this like synchromistic sort of approach to like how you are living your life. I'm like, the better I can connect with these dogs, the more safe I can make them feel, the softer and the easier they are going to be with me. And you can't fake that. And I know that if I'm doing this with these dogs, this is me gaining entrance into the deep underworld in which the Susquehanna River is access to.
Fuck yeah. That's glorious. That you are a master storyteller. Honestly, it's quite infatuating. Sorry. But no, that is some really deep stuff, because, you know, this river holds little bar to, you know, the Mississippi and the Columbia River over here, or over on the West Coast, you know, because of just its sheer people's history, like the spirit of the people that have been along that river for a very long time. And I mean, like, from, you know, ancient native times to, oh, look at those boys. You got them tamed, dude. You got them tamed. They're gonna let you through
at this moment they are. At this moment they are.
They're gonna let you through the gate.
I mean, I'm definitely, they won't, they are very needy, and they want the constant attention. Like it's been a 180 in terms of the dynamic. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go with your point, Ronan.
Yeah, no, it's just, I like that energy is just, it's speaking through these natural landscapes, and you're able to pick up on this, you know, this ideology of ancient river mysticism that goes through, you know, astrotheological traits. It goes through physical traits of like agriculture and like living upon. But a lot of times they were speaking, you know, about like these star stories, and, you know, like calling the Duat was like the Milky Way or what have you. But I could imagine that the star stories associated with this river, and these rivers in that area with the ancient culture had some correlation as well, astrologically lining up with the river or something.
All of that, right? Is 100% like factually true. Like, this region was considered sacred area, the lower Susquehanna. It was where like pre-colonies, it was where like 5 great peoples, like this is where they all touched, and where the geography like changed, this lower Susquehanna River, and it was treated as like this is the sacred land for all of us. And so like this region has very much like it has that history, which is one of the reasons why I think that Harrisburg has been so like polluted, you know.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think of when you think of the name Harrisburg? Does any...
Oh, all right. So the Susquehanna River is, and I don't want to get too much, I don't want to go too far into the weeds in this, but the Susquehanna River is a esoteric mirroring of what's now called the Seine River, the river that goes through France and goes through Paris. That was once called Sequana, the Sequana River. Oh. And when you go and you look at the history of like how the Susquehanna got its name and stuff like that, like can you hear the dogs growling? Hopefully you'll hear them growling. So as I started doing research and looking at this parallel, and the parallel is primarily it's just in a naming. Like the reason why I know that this parallel exists is because all of these things from culture. So the question I ask myself is like, you know, how deep does it go, or why are they going? Why has there been a specific mirroring in what's called mystical toponymy by choosing certain name places along this river in this very kind of like subtle way? Why was this done? Like, I mean, I certainly have some ideas of what I think that answer is, but I'm more interested in just being clear and recognizing that the organizations that are responsible for like the namings of places and municipalities, like they made it immensely clear that the Susquehanna and the Seine River, they have like a resonance. So Mark asked a question about Harrisburg. So Harrisburg, on probably 5 or 6 different, like very, very obvious ways, Harris and Paris are resonators. In the same way the Seine goes through Paris, it goes through Harrisburg, and we begin to see this in so many different in so many levels. Like the very fact of the county which Harrisburg is located in is called Dauphin County. That's a French word, and it's the title of the son of Louis the 14th or something. He was called the Dauphin of France. And so the rest of Pennsylvania, at least this part of Pennsylvania, all of the counties are English. It's York, it's Adams, it's Lancaster. And so there's no precedent to have this French connection, but we've added this in there. And the list goes on and on and on. I can like demonstrate it, but I'm just going to go and use those 2. But that's part of like the energy manipulation. It is my opinion that the Harris and Paris, the Seine, Susquehanna are it's pointing at a deeper like knowledge of at least how ancient people used to relate to rivers, and they are linked. The 2 have been linked, but because I know that this part of the world, this river through the Appalachians, like its history is much, much older than what we see on the continent of Europe in so many different ways. Like I think this is a return to the home. The points I was making about Susquehanna during the Celtic time in Europe was really just a mirroring of what we're now calling the Susquehanna. Like it's a 360. But that's just the way I see it.
No, well, and that makes a lot of sense considering what I just talked to Michael Laflemme about, and how Atlantis is this ancient precursor to not just European civilizations, but Native American, South Indigenous American cultures, and beyond. Even even down in Polynesia, Micronesia, they have their own roots to ancient cultures. But I wanted to ask you about Harrisburg, because John Harris is who the town is named after officially. And John Harris was a ferryman on the Susquehanna River, which exactly, the ferryman would take you across the river Styx to the underworld. But it's also Harris is connected to the name Harry, which, as benign and friendly as the name Harry sounds, it actually comes from a word that means to make war, lay waste, ravage, and plunder. And all of these words are like Harry, Harris, and Henry even are all kind of from the same root name, and they have this connection to warlords or people who make war. And you said Pennsylvania chose Harrisburg as a capital for multiple reasons, but you said, or the international airport was chosen there for multiple reasons, but one of those was the military presence. And I just thought that was interesting to point out, the etymology symbolism
like
there.
All the cave system, which Roman made reference to, like from Canada down to Kentucky is, it's massive. And, we don't know what's actually down there, like me, you, and Roman, but we've heard enough stories, this is a pre-existing, like really well-established substructure. And it is what's even being told publicly is the location in which like all of the continuation of government is, like, the Camp David for the White House, the Greenbrier in West Virginia, for the Senate and House of Representatives, like all of Washington, D.C.'s like continuation of government plans that they tell us about are all in these caves. Closer up to Harrisburg, but still part of that same system, is the Army War College, where like if you're a career military leader, you come here to get your like PhD in military science. Like, yes,
Nuts.
like this is like in the substructure of the land here, of like the current expression.
Now, Roman, I cut you off. You had something loaded up, and you guys also mentioned before we started recording the megalithic park. I don't know if we've mentioned that since recording, but what were you going to say, Roman?
Well, we were touching on this idea of esoteric mirroring of, these rivers and having this, as above, so below duotic type of, fucking energy going on, which is crazy. And, has been talked about the idea that, Egypt was here. There's so much evidence that this land has been traversed by many other cultures before the whole story about, the CCs, right? The Christopher Columbus, the Captain Cooks, the yada yadas. Anyways, the question I had, right off the bat, was, what do you believe in Pangea? Or how that the tectonic workings worked, and that the land was maybe at one point one piece.
Well, I know the maps that they show us, it makes obvious that like is really supported.
Yeah,
It's seemingly like whether or not this is all astroturfed or not, I don't know. But like there's evidence. So this is the tricky thing. The tricky thing of doing the thing which we're doing is we're trying to use the tools of the system that lies to us to see through their lies. Yes. And so there's a certain circular logic, which is like, well, I know they're a bunch of liars, but they said this, and now I'm going to go. So I take that with a really, really big grain of salt. I'm like, I don't know. And generally speaking, all issues which do not impact my immediate life, I don't have an issue. I don't have an opinion on, which I can't, which like, I'm like, I don't know. Like the moment that that's important to me, well, then I'll probably weigh in more so. But I do know, like, I'm not refuting it, but I just don't know. They've lied to me about so many other things. Right. I don't pay so much attention. What I do know is that they say there's certain minerals on the western coast of Africa which match up exactly to the same minerals on the East Coast, and that is part of like the proof and demonstration of tectonic plate theory.
Yeah.
I have so many questions about like what any of this is, like this being where we're having our life experience, what is the life experience, that I can't answer the most fundamental questions. I definitely don't think I can have an opinion on like some of the finer points of what the makeup of this environment is.
Word. Well, that's a fantastic answer, because it's true discernment, right? When you look at it like that, and discerning the fact that yada yada, that we'd been lied to, and like, because I don't fucking know either, but I do live on an active volcano on an island, and funny enough, talking about runways, just really quick, just to sideject, they closed down the Kona airport here. That's not even that old of an airport, because of the crack in the ground, just like 2 days ago. And they said, oh, it's permanently closed. You cannot take any flights out of here indefinitely. And then they fixed it the next night. So it was just kind of funny. And the other synchronistic thing that we had we're just talking about is with this river symbolism is I just spoke with author Anthony Peake, who's one of his first books that he wrote was called Cheating the
Chasing the Ferryman?
Cheating the Ferryman, yes.
Cheating the Ferryman. I knew it was a CH word.
Yeah, and so it's really funny that we're kind of talking about this. It was yesterday morning that we were chatting with him, and this idea that the consciousness is directly connected to a grid on the map, that there's an ancient map that lays over the landscape. And the reason I was asking about your idea of Pangea, that maybe if these lands were connected at one point, there is a true matching of these rivers matching up. And there is a adverse side to the map that we're following, like the idea of Francis Bacon's New Atlantis book that he didn't get, it wasn't published till after his lifetime. I'm pretty sure it published after his death. So he didn't actually quote unquote finish it.
It was published after his death.
Right? No, I went down a deep Francis Bacon rabbit hole for a while because you're doing the esoteric shit and alchemy and stuff. Francis Bacon.
You got to go to that. Good for you.
But the talk about esoteric mirroring Francis Bacon and Ben Franklin, kind of like everything was planned out like in France and in these areas through the Rosicrucian movement, in my opinion, the actual like projection and the algorithm of what America was to be, the true new Rosicrucian Enlightenment.
I did such a big video like in 2017 about Ben Franklin and Francis Bacon as being
shit,
like completely down to like the BF and the FB and
watch that.
Yeah, that's episode 4 in Mystic Lancaster. Like that was I
those
can't
are the epic videos. Yes,
like we reached the same conclusion, or we had the same questions, and definitely I hadn't put together what you just said. Ben Franklin is so tied to France,
right?
Yeah,
dude. Yeah, and so that's a trip to like just straight see this French connection into Harrisburg, which is. Because you weren't. So, were we going to talk about your travels? Were we going to talk about where you were?
How long do we record? How long is one of your episodes?
We typically go anywhere between an hour and 2 hours. So, as long as you'll give us, Mike, as long as you have time for it.
Because I think I need a good
hour
for the stuff I want to cover. But there might be some more things to talk. What we're talking about right now. But I can go a little bit later.
Okay, cool. Tara, did you just find... We picked up this awesome new book. Tara found it. It's called America's Nation of the Goddess. And a lot of what you guys were just talking about is in this book. It's pretty incredible.
The woman who wrote it, her husband...
is Scott Walter.
Who is a Freemason, like big time, I guess. And he wrote the foreword to this book, but he helped them kind of navigate the book, I guess, when they were writing it. But one of the chapters is the French connection.
Right.
And so
they talk
I
about
didn't read
these
it yet, but
Venus families
there's probably some
from France who came over here as farmers and kind of had a huge influence on the metaphysical landscape of America.
The mystical toponymy.
Yeah. And, Washington, D.C. and New York City are two big examples of that. In New York City, they have the obelisks that when you look at them from bird's eye view, it creates Orion's belt.
Yeah,
so there's literally an Orion's belt mirrored into New York City on the Hudson River there. But yeah, tons of interesting stuff in that book for us to fold in. But on the note of Harrisburg, nice. we have done multiple episodes for one place. So I think maybe we can stop for now, and maybe we'll come back to Harrisburg at some point. But Mike, why don't you tell us about the rest of what you had prepared?
All right, I think we can do that. So what I wanted, I keep readjusting because the light on the room were down. So let me get comfortable.
Take your time.
So when we started this conversation earlier, I talked about it in terms of an approach to life. Like this is like a way of seeing and interpreting reality and
Perceiving, right?
perceiving. But then
Good
that's
word.
going to how you perceive reality, and then is going to move and eventually. Hold on for one moment. I got to shut this curtain. It's driving me nuts.
That's how it was in
11
my
and a half.
last apartment. Anytime the sunset was coming, it was like sun in my eyes, in the camera. I feel you. All right.
So my life has changed. How I live my life has changed. Really, it's been on an evolution for about 2 years now. And this past year, I had become very nomadic. In fact, I'm nomadic right now. Like I don't have a permanent address. I'm moving around from a variety of different places. And there's a reason for that. So I don't want to get too philosophical, but I'm going to just mention this. I mean, it's always changing. Like the world's always changing, but we're like the changes of our cultural reality are. I mean, you know, you're paying attention. You see what's happening. Like it's really going in a very clear direction. Like the whole technocratic dictatorship. Like when Web 3.0 is like a regular thing. Like life is going to be totally different and it's going to be normalized. So no one's going to really care about it, but we're not there yet. And we could see where it's going. So when I said philosophically, it is, I don't think we're learning to go, when I say we, I mean this community of people who are both doing open, expanding their perception abilities to like a different way of having life. It's not just for the sake of like, oh, let me do that and then continue to participate and feed into a system. And so it is, in my opinion, like what we're doing, the community is this is what it looks like to move off of the system, to have another way. Like, you know, where you're saying like all of these layers and like, what's the nature of reality? I don't know, but you know, the whole, almost like the invisible ships metaphor, if you're familiar with that. Do you know what I'm talking about with the invisible ships?
No idea.
It's a metaphor that said that when Columbus and his flotillas first arrived in the Caribbean, that all of the locals, they couldn't even see the ships because it was so outside of their paradigm of reality, it was invisible. Their brains were unable to take the visual stimuli and they couldn't see it. But it was through the studying of like the changes of the patterns of the waves, because they're so familiar with it, that they began to recognize, oh, there's something different. There's something unique here. It's coming from that direction. And eventually they like backed into seeing something. And I think that's kind of what we're doing, but hopefully not in that narrative where of what we're waking up to. And what we're doing is we're understanding a different way of which life can be lived, and that life, as we're beginning to see it, you know, first with the research, then paying attention to synchronicities, and then really becoming embodied into this way of living.
Or vice versa.
Right, because it's coming both ways. Like that reality will show itself. Like it finds us. Like this is part of like the mystery of whatever all of this is. So all of that being said, like when I look at how my life has changed and what I'm doing, it is with that as a grounding. Like that's what I'm doing. Like I'm not just like out having a good time as much as like finding and trailblazing like how a reality, an experiential reality, which is so outside of like what we've become conditioned to believe how life should work, to create that space for that energy to come in, to find me, to find other people, and so forth. So I'm going to go and share, and that's all the synchromistic stuff. And I want to go and share 4 stories of what that looks like in reality. In like, you know, not just like, you know, metaphysical philosophy, but this is how it spills through an experiential reality and how it continues to drive and support and show itself. And I do this as a demonstration so that, like, kind of like what we're saying in the beginning, like we're developing a muscle, and this is what we're moving to. I'm not saying everyone has to do as extreme as what I do, but recognizing that soon the conversation you get back from life is this clear when you're perceiving correctly for what to look at. Can I start?
Yes, please do.
All right, brother. So, what screen do you see? Do you see the one that says 33 Nights on the Road?
33 Nights on the Road.
Is there a way you can go full screen on the slideshow?
Let's see if I can.
I think if you hit view or maybe share.
Did that work?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Unfortunately, on this way, I can't see what slides are coming up. But I think I know what I'm going to do.
Okay.
So this summer, I did a, do you see my cursor?
No, but I think there's a way we can.
I love your people,
I think if you
Like
stop.
the people?
your drawings.
Yeah.
They remind me of like Kachina dolls,
Yeah.
like how
They were
those are drawn. What?
They were figures from collage artwork I made like around 2012.
I remember you showed us when we were at your house back in the day.
I just cut out like I took
2
a
years
digital
ago.
photograph and then I just cropped out each of the characters and I put them in different places.
I love it. If you
Can't see
stop
my cursor?
if you stop sharing and then share again, there may be a button that will allow you to say, it will say like show cursor.
All right.
You just have to check that and then proceed with screen sharing.
Optimize video clip, share sound, advanced, portion, video, content, files,
You don't see it?
apps. Well, I'll make it work.
Okay.
Here we go. There. Let me
Oh, now we can see your cursor. I think maybe when you're full screen, we just can't
It's when
see
it goes full screen.
So
That's the
don't
problem.
worry about the full screen. We can see it here. This is fine.
Give me a moment to just get this. Like, I want to get as big as we can. Then.
Yeah, take your time.
But I think I can talk at the same time. Nope, that's not it. All right, we're just going to go with this. So this thing which I'm doing is known as arrow circulation, and it's with an arrow, and you're circulating on the land, and you are preparing it for a new destiny. So that's like, the thought, but this is what it looks like in reality. So we did a 33-day trip cross country this summer. And the purpose of it was blending river waters, the Susquehanna River, into all of these other rivers to like weave them together. But we also we framed it up as from Sequana to Sequoia, from the Susquehanna River, and I use the word Sequana as the Susquehanna River's like hidden name, to the oldest river, to Sequoia, the biggest trees.
Or oldest trees, right? Aren't they very old as well?
Yes, they're old. I don't know if they're the oldest trees, but they're definitely old without a doubt. But they're the biggest. And so, like a river, we could think about it as primordial female, and a tree is primordial male, like all these different sort of things. The point I'm trying to make right now is like having, beginning the journey with a mystical not even an expectation, but stance. Like, this is what we're doing. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I don't know what any of this thing is, what's going to occur, but I know that this is what I'm going to do. And here we go. We could see like the place. We brought the starboard, and these are different places along the trip where we brought out the starboard. And all we're doing is we're building the configuration of the heavens at the moment in which the starboard was done. We did starboards in Virginia, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Missouri.
New Mexico.
All right. So this is the trip. And now I'm going to go and I did, Mark, you and I, we did shows together. Like, so this, you know, that I have cataloged many of the strange and synchronistic events that just occurred during this trip. But I want to focus on one because it was the most meaningful to me personally.
Well, I'll say for the audience's purpose, if they didn't catch our interview together and they want to hear about from the interval of Palm Springs to about Madrid, New Mexico, we covered a lot of that in our conversation on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy show. So,
all right. And yeah, you'd hear all the details. And I was fresh. I just returned back and I was still trying to like, what the hell just happened? Like I had all of these, like, if you will, data points, and I had all of from these experiences, but like what occurred? Because I knew it was deeper than just like, you know, like a whole bunch of synchronicities, like something was happening. So the one story which I'm going to share here about this trip, I called in the larger presentation, Hollywood Entanglement Manufacturing Dream Reality. All right. So the trip here was always from Pennsylvania, and we were going to go to Sequoia. But before that, we arrived in Los Angeles, and we arrived at the Santa Monica Pier. We arrived at the Santa Monica Pier on the 4th of July. And I wasn't the planner. Christy planned like the itinerary, and her daughter came with us for the first half of the trip. And her daughter really wanted to be at Santa Monica Pier. And I personally didn't like, I was not looking forward to that. I was like, the last thing I want to do is be at a really crowded place on the 4th of July. Like that sounded like the last thing I would personally prefer. But my personal preferences really weren't important in this situation. Like this was about someone else. So, you know, I'm a big boy, so I can check my personal preferences. That doesn't mean that I don't have them. It just means that I check them. So what we see right here are screenshots from my phone because I took 3 pictures. You could see this one. It's all July 4th. It's 7:43, 7:48, 7:49. This is me on the Santa Monica Pier. And this is like a picture of myself to prove what's happening. And the reason why I took these pictures, because one, we get down there and I'm like, this is friggin' awesome. Like, I'm just having so much fun with the people watching and the way the air felt on my skin. And I'm like, all of the things like which I wanted to avoid, like it wasn't as bad as I was thinking, or it didn't matter because there was this other thing which was so much more fun. And I just kind of like, I was laughing at myself for just being kind of like a curmudgeon. And we walked to the end of the Santa Monica Pier, at which point I have a realization. I have side note, I have discovered that within my life that I can use Hollywood productions and they reflect back something which is immensely personal. I'm not suggesting that movies were made for me, but what I am saying is that the magic of Hollywood is that when you're looking for something, it will give you like something very, very specific for you. And in one of my favorite films, or a film that has stuck with me for multiple reasons over the years, is this movie called Southland Tales.
Yo, that movie is fucking fantastic.
Yes, it is. And
loaded with symbolism. Sorry.
Yes, it is. So Southland Tales. Really,
I'll have to watch that.
You definitely have to. Southland Tales, the set and setting of the film is Santa Monica Pier over the 4th of July weekend. And so I'm like, holy shit, how did I end up at Southland Tales? Because I am on Santa Monica Pier on the 4th of July.
Isn't that
so all of a sudden, like, I know game is on. And I'm like, this is like becoming lucid into the dream. Like, I'm like, it's happening right now. Like, I know that this wasn't planned. So here we see this is Southland Tales. Here's some pictures of it. kind of jump over that. Southland Tales is a very convoluted story, and it's a complex, surreal science fiction film directed by Richard Kelly. So it was his follow-up after Donnie Darko. The story revolves around several interconnected characters and subplots. Understanding the main plot requires delving into the various threads that converge as the film progresses. If there's ever been a better description of like my form of storytelling, I think that would be a great way of describing. So we see right here, Southland Tales, it deals with quantum entanglement. Like the subtext of the film is like asking about the nature of reality. And it is talking about how like things get entangled on the quantum level and it spills over. And so in the movie, during the 4th of July event, this is the plot of the movie, a rift in the space-time continuum occurs. So that's why I mean like game time, like I know that I am living out when the Hollywood magic says, like, this is when the rift occurs. Expect some crazy ass quantum entanglement. Like, not really like expecting like I'm paranoid or I'm on or any like high expectations that if I don't see a portal open up in front of me, it's a dud. It's like, okay, this is the time and place. Just start paying attention and pay attention richly and have fun with it. I mean, that's the big part of it. And so
gotta be open.
And the boundaries between reality and fiction become increasingly blurred. That was like a line from this article. So, okay. So here's more talking about the article. It says like at the end of Santa Monica Pier on the rooftop of the Maria Sol building is where Private Abilene sits perched. Like that was a main part of the film, that the character was an ex-army guy and he's sitting up here. And this is exactly, if you're familiar with the Santa Monica Pier, this is where this is spray painted or painted on, like right here, like it's all lining up. I'm finding myself there. Like we can see like it's bleeding through. So the question becomes, well, then what happened that day? What happened that day? I just had a really fun time. I had a fun time with my family, right? It was like a family time. And what we did was we took the bus. It's the first time I've ever taken a city bus. I take the city bus down here. We walk the length of the Santa Monica Pier. We take that picture and we decide we're going to get something to eat. And it is 4th of July, and it's probably the busiest day or the busiest night of the Santa Monica Pier all year long. And we're walking back, and there's all of these like quintessential like Southern California iconic things here. Like it's the end of Route 66 and they're like all of these like restaurants, which are what you would expect to see in the California.
That's interesting. Route 66. That's the Michael Hoffman talks about it. The Psychic Highway.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
This is a real life Michael Hoffman story coming alive in front of you. Like one of the stands right here is the official completion of Route 66. So we're looking for a place to eat, and every place is just filled with people. We're just walking and walking and walking and walking, and we're returning back to like where we're gonna then have to take the bus home. And we couldn't find, like every place was filled, and we're really hungry, and we've got like an 11-year-old child who is starting to get a little bit ornery. We're like, we got to get some food. And the only place that was open is a place I would never go to if I had my choices. But part of playing this game, which we're playing, part of meeting life this way is you learn to check your preferences and you surrender to what life is giving you. Like that takes a little bit of surrender. And so what happened was we just ate at the only place we could eat, which was the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, which is like a chain restaurant based around the whole like Forrest Gump movie.
That's funny.
We conclude this day. Like nothing magical happened, no portals happened, but I know what my quantum entanglement was like I got to go to the Bubba Gum Shrimp House. All right. The entanglement shows itself on July 15th. Tara, did you have something to say before I go into the next chapter?
I just heard a bird in the background.
The dogs disappeared too as they started telling the story. They were starting. I didn't know if you heard them tussling in the background.
They're like, not
All
the
right.
place.
I just love how you can surrender. I just love how you surrender to the moments and you don't let, anything hold you back when you're
Well,
traveling and stuff, because that's so key, like when you set out on an adventure, audience.
with
Right?
the ability, if you're going to have the communication is subtle. And so when your will is strong, like your will is an inner will, like I'm going to go on this mission, like that's your drive and I'm
Yeah.
committed to doing the mission. But then once you're in it, like now it's a dance. And if you overpower the dance, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it. And so what does that mean? It's like learning to surrender, like learning, like, and the easiest time to surrender, like when it's the most clear, is when you have no other options. Like you're like, all right, this is what we're going to do. So that was July 4th. From there, we go on to the Sequoias, 11 days of adventure occurs. And then July 15th, I've probably even forgotten about this. Like I knew it happened, it was the back of my mind, but I'm just like caught in life at this point. So the entanglement shows itself on July 15th, but I kind of know what to look for. So on July 15th, we just finished a couple days in Sedona, and we were going to drive to go, and we stayed with some friendlies in Sedona, and then we're going to go drive to other friendlies in Crestone, Colorado. And this is, I don't know, like probably like a 15-hour trip maybe. And we decided that we were going to stay the night, like almost midway, and it's in Utah, and it's in Monument Valley. And so we, through Airbnb, we got this, we rented, or whatever you call it, an Airbnb, this teepee from Sparrowhawk Teepees. And this is a picture of the teepee. This is a picture from the phone. This is when it was taken, July 15th. And so we arrived there. And we then go and continue from here along our trip. And just being here, like Monument Valley is like a really, really, like if you haven't been there before, it's a natural landscape, which is there's no it's one of those natural landscapes. It's not the only one, but it's like so unique and so evident that something of great magnitude is being expressed here from the natural world, that it takes your breath away. So we leave our Monument Valley Airbnb and we start driving along on our 15-hour trip. And then I see this sign: Forest Gump Hill Scenic View Area. And we're in the middle of nowhere. Like Monument Valley is like in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that's part of its beauty. And it is a mythical, mystical, spiritual nowhere. Like all of the peoples that live there have always known that. Like it's self-evident when you see it. And now I've got Forrest Gump. Like I knew that on the quantum entanglement day, I ate at Forrest Gump's restaurant.
That's crazy.
And now Forrest Gump shows itself.
Question: what significance, like pop culture, like Forrest Gump was a movie, right? It was never a story. It was a movie, and then these came after this one movie, correct? Or is this like an ongoing story?
Huge movie.
That I'm unaware of.
Huge movie. It was a movie which was geared towards baby boomers. It told their story. It was hugely successful in the Academy Awards, hugely successful in the box office. This was a film that had an immense amount of influence on the collective consciousness.
Oh yeah,
like, regardless if you like it or don't like it, is irrelevant. Like we know that this is
great movie,
a marker. And I know this.
But I'm curious, like, was it ever a story? Like,
it was a book. It was based upon a book.
Oh, okay. There was a book. Okay. I was curious. Okay.
It was based upon a book.
Nuts.
So I go and I see this and I'm like, and my mind starts going. I'm like, what is this about? Like the feedback loop has come, and now comes like that interesting part where you're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
what do I do with this? And so I'm sitting in the car and we're taking this long trip, as you can see right here. And then right around here in Durango, I'm like, I'm asking myself, like, am I reading too much into things? Like, I'm trying to be as scientific, apply as much of my own scientific method, Francis Bacon, to this. And so a big part of as Mark knows, of my understanding of arrow circulation comes from this book called A Story Waiting to Pierce You. And that's where the arrow comes from, and the meaning of the arrow. And along this car trip, as we're driving to Crestone, we pass this place. These are like 40 feet in the air, these giant arrows. And so we pull over on the side of the road. This is the place. It's right outside of this roadside store. And I'm like, okay, that's the second sign. I know that there's something into this Forrest Gump feedback loop, because this is also in my language set. And I went and I start looking into the movie. Now I've got internet service, and I can go and look at Forrest Gump and see why that was called the Forrest Gump Hill. And the reason why it was this is called Forrest Gump Hill Scenic View is because in arguably the most iconic scene from the movie, Forrest Gump like has an epiphany. And that's what the sign is for. Where in the movie that scene was shot where he had his epiphany. This is what Monument Valley looks like. And so now I'm like, okay, this is starting to become like, oh, am I supposed to have an epiphany? This is the question I ask myself, because I've just quantum entangled with Forrest Gump. I did that on the quantum entanglement. It's all Hollywood magic, right? And you go and you look, like this part of the movie has to do, if you're not familiar with the movie, like this character Forrest Gump finds himself running literally physically running across America. And he's like, oh, one day I just started to start running and I just didn't stop. And then right here, he's like, I decided to stop. And people start following him. And so this is the point in the movie when he stops running. A lot of people who have been fans of the movie have plotted out, because they show in the movie all of the places which Forrest Gump went when he ran, and they plotted it out on a map. And Forrest Gump did this arrow circulation. Very, very similar, if you remember, to this map, which we see right here.
Yeah.
So it's like the same sort of idea of Forrest Gump.
Can I just point something out that occurred to me?
Yes.
He's wearing a red hat when he's running.
MAGA.
And that's kind of what I thought of, was the MAGA red hats. And there's tons of other. Go ahead.
And the Phrygian caps.
Thank you. Yes, the red Phrygian cap from or the Liberty cap, as it was
the
called.
legacy of liberty.
The Alchemist.
Yeah, there's so much symbolism with the red cap, and I don't think it's a coincidence that MAGA chose that color. Obviously, Republican is red, but still, there's like a symbolism there with that red hat that just occurred to me.
Well, I'll tell you what occurred to me when I saw this, because as the Forrest Gump symbology was starting to bleed through, and the day when it bled through, that also in that day I drove from Sedona to Monument Valley, and you pass through Flagstaff, which is where Isaac Cappy was thrown off of the bridge on Route 66, which is often thought of that it's because of all of the things he was saying about Tom Hanks. And I'm like, what am I tapping into here?
What the fuck,
that's what
dude?
crossed my mind.
Wow.
But anyway, so this goes someplace really, really interesting. So also right here, Forrest Gump's running route. His first stop was the Santa Monica yacht. That's the pier. So he began his journey on the Santa Monica pier. So I've got a feedback loop. Like, all of these things are happening. So I went and I watched that scene where he stops running, and in the movie, how it is explained, he's like, he says that he stopped running, and he lists the exact amount of time he had been running. He said, I've been running for this many years, this many months, and this many days. That is the line from the film. And that's a really well-known part of the movie. And so it says right here, Forrest Gump's run took him 3 years, 2 months, 14 days, and 16 hours. So what's interesting about this is, if I have a end date of when Forrest Gump stopped running, like if there is a bleed through, if there is a quantum entanglement, if Mike is experiencing a quantum entanglement with the fictional character Forrest Gump, and I'm at the location when he stopped running, and he's been running for 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days, well, then all I got to do is go back in time 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days and see what the fuck all this is about.
Oh, shit.
Right? I mean, it's right in front of me, like it's telling me to do this.
The steps are there.
And I put it in the day counter, and I go back this amount of time, 3
That's
years, 2 months, 14 days, and it brings me back to May 1st, 2020. May Day. So wouldn't you know it, on May 1st, 2020, I started doing a rather strange thing. I moved into a church. And for 30 days, I lived, or actually it was 60 days I lived in the church. But I cataloged it on Instagram and on YouTube. And you can see this right here. This is Man in the High Church 30-day update. And this came out on May 30th, 2020. So 30-day update is because May 1st is when I moved into it. That's when I started my running, I suppose.
And somebody asked you if the church was a portal.
It very well could have been. And what was really interesting was I was in a relationship with a woman, and I needed a break from it. And that's why I moved in here. And the reason why Forrest Gump started running in the movie is because he was running from Jenny. And that was kind of who I was running from.
Wow.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Is this specifically satirically named after Man of the High Castle, Philip K. Dick?
Of course.
Oh my God. Well, talk about time split dimension, orthogonal timelines, and I'm pretty sure Philip K. Dick's sister's name was Jenny. I'm gonna have to check on that, but that's just I'm obsessed with PKD now.
I've done a lot of work with Man in the High Castle and how it ties into Pennsylvania in particular.
What?
But we'll cross that because we're almost at the conclusion of this. I've got 4 more slides on this. So I was left, and I think when I first started doing this sharing this, because Mark's heard this story 3 or 4 times probably by now. I was really caught up in this ideal. I'm like, am I running from something? Like, what am I? Like, these were the questions I was asking myself.
Oh, can I just say too that the Corona Borealis is visible in the night sky starting in May to August, I think.
Do you mean aurora?
No, the Corona Borealis.
What's that?
It's
the sun?
It's the crown of stars.
Ah.
In the Bear constellation.
Wow.
And then so that's May 2022, and you're having all these revelations. Running about yourself. How long have you been running for,
Well, I was asking myself these questions like once like I'm seeing this quantum bleed through. So there's another part of Forrest Gump which is also very interesting. And it's this theme of a feather throughout the movie. 1994's Forrest Gump has become iconic in many ways, and one of its most memorable components is the symbolic feather that shows up during the film's beginning and end, but it's actually throughout the movie. Like, it shows this feather, like, kind of like it was part of the plot device. So the reason why that becomes interesting is because so Susquehanna, at least one of the ways in which that name is given to us is, or told to us, explained to us, is that it is a Lene Lenape word. And the Lenape, they spoke in the Algonquin tongue. Mm-hmm. So in the Algonquin tongue, the word feather is Mike Wann.
What?
Yeah.
Whoa.
So then I started thinking like, well, okay, well, there are two characters kind of in this film. There's Forrest Gump the fool, and then there's the feather. And I'm kind of like, we're talking about the quantum entanglement. We're talking about like the different stories, the different versions of yourself. Which one am I entangling to? Am I the fool or am I the feather? Have I been the fool? Have I been the feather?
So, you're always talking to each other.
The conclusion which I've eventually reached was that actually, well, we need to add this. Mike Wann in the Algonquin tongue, it's actually, not only does it mean feather, but it's also a title. In the same way that Talakiel is a title, we've talked about that before, Mark. Mike Wann is a title. And the reason why I say that is because there's been another Pennsylvanian who is known as Mike Wann. It was known as Mike Wann to the Lenape, and that was William Penn. And William Penn was, despite everything that happened after William Penn, he was revered by all of the peoples in the New World. And it's just like the promises he had made had been broken by other people and not by William Penn. And Mike Wann was a title, and it was a title given to him because he also was an arrow circulator. And so the conclusion which this synchro-mystic journey, like, being able to take something of meaning out of this approach, other than just purely looking at the signs, is like looking at like real world feedback systems to yourself. And so looking at, when I was telling you that this journey began, like there was a real purpose. Like there was a philosophical purpose in which I'm taking it as a way to embody a certain way of being at a particular time, for both it being the most integrous way for me to live, but then also in means of a demonstration for all of us as we're all trying to kind of go and figure out what it looks like to allow this new reality to find us. Like I've taken on the responsibility of the feather of Mike Wann. And so to be able to go and step into seeing oneself from a deeper perspective, this is the sigil I have for the Mike Wann. Like that is what, when we take these approaches, which begin with just like studying our environment and beginning to integrate our thought on a deeper level, the feedback becomes very, very real. And it is my opinion that all of the peoples, all of us, all of this community, like we're becoming to recognize on a very, very like tangible way, like what our role and purpose is as this reality shifts. And as the ones who are able to see or begin to see the markings, the waves in the land, well, then we will begin, as we become stronger and more adept at these abilities, like for each of us, the clarity of like our individual role will become as clear, I would say, as what that was for me.
Wow. Very well put together.
One could hope.
I love it.
Well, one could hope. We could all strive.
I think it's incredible. And yeah, it's a great example of what someone can achieve when they connect with this deeper awareness in their own life. And I really love the sigil you put together. I think it's a very meaningful but simple kind of, a symbol. But can you show us that again? I want to see it again.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. You should make a chess piece or something.
Yeah.
All right.
One thing I know about feather symbolism is that that it's like when I was told by an indigenous person one time that when you find feathers on the ground, or like you keep finding feathers, or feathers show themselves to you, more like that, it's a direct connection between like poking into the ethereal realm, or like a sign from the heavens, because birds are the ones that get to traverse those planes readily whenever they, like they are the communicators between the gods and us. And, so there's like heavy, deep spiritual connection to the birds, right, that fly to the heavens. But then when you get a feather, that's like, they said that it was what you are on that right path. You are on the path. You need to keep finding the feathers, and so when you are in line with your true spirit, where you're supposed to be going, what you're doing, feathers present themselves to you. That's what I know about feather symbolism. Seems to be lining up here with this beautiful story.
That's exactly what the title means. Like, as a holder of that title, like there's a teacher responsibility. What we're doing is we're teaching people to become aligned and integrated with the actual unfolding of life, not paradigm ways. Like to be able to symbolically find their feathers. Like it's not a person, it's a holding of a line. This has in here, like if you look at it, here's the M, here's the W, here's the K, and here's the N. And then because all of the other symbols associated with it. So it's obviously has a bird symbol, so feather. We've got an arrow. The feather is what makes an arrow work. It's what makes the arrow work. And so this has an arrow element to it right here, but it's also a compass, because that's what all of this is about, is finding one's way. And so, so like that's what this so this is like for me, for how I'm going forward, meeting life, how I've been living life, like this is the feedback mechanism. One example of like what this practice, which begins by just like paying attention to your own backyard, by doing the research, like you're developing the muscle. And this is for, I think, a very, very like practical, real purpose, which is the change of reality. In fact, if anything else, like, as we're seeing this rebirth and on life, what the arrow circulator does is it prepares and I'm not saying I'm the only one. I'm saying all of us are. I think they're anyone who kind of moves around the world, and the world can be like their own county, and with a consciousness of it, like we're circulating and preparing the land for a coming destiny outside of the current paradigm. That's what an arrow circulator does. And another way in which this is another symbol in which like these times have been talking about are like creation myths and primordial waters. We're talking about rivers. So on July 12th, just before the whole sort of like Forrest Gump thing, I met up with Emily Moyer for the first time in person. You could see right here, this is our texts.
We
and
love
so on
Emily.
Wednesday, the July 12th, I'm saying, okay, we'll meet you for lunch at 11 o'clock. Or it's 11 here, we'll meet you at lunch at noon. And we're meeting her in Palm Springs, California. And so the reason I'm showing you this is because on August 20th, Palm Springs, the very place where me and Emily met. So two people who've known each other from just a online knowing of one another, never meeting face to face in time space. We meet, and then on August 20th, the very place we met with their biggest rainstorm in its entire history. Biblical flooding, like so much rain happens there. And the reason I bring that up is because the Palm Springs flood occurred exactly 40 days after we met. We met on the 12th. Then the rain occurred on August 20th, which is 40 days. And so on 40 days is tied in directly to the Western mythology's biblical creation myth of the 40 days and 40 nights of rain. And even more interesting is it is in Genesis chapter 7, verse 12, where it mentions the 40 days of rain. And 7:12 is the day we met.
Wow.
And so again, when you're paying attention, you begin to see, like, this is the nature of what we're doing here, is we're creating we're embodying the energy for a rebirth. This is the nature of this synchro-mystic walking, this dream walking, if you will.
Did Emily move from Austin? She
lives in Austin.
But you guys just happen to both be in Palm Springs at the same time?
We just happen to be in Palm Springs at the same time.
What the fuck?
And didn't we, I think we mentioned Palm Springs briefly in one of our California Esoteric America episodes.
Yeah, one of my favorite episodes.
Right, Inland Empire?
The Masonic cave. Yeah, the Inland Empire episode was like, he brought up all these Masonic caves that are there, as well as the Scientology headquarters that's armed guards,
and even
surrounding a platform at the base of a mountain.
Even Palm Springs itself is kind of like a oxymoron, because the name kind of gives this idea of like a tropical oasis, at least in my mind, when in fact the Sargasso, or not the Sargasso Sea, what's the name of the body of water? The lakes, it's like lake something, and it's pretty much dry.
It's a desert.
Lake Mead?
It's basically desert over there. I mean, it's right by Joshua Tree State Park. And,
it was once like a huge, it was once a huge artificial body of water, or was a real body of water that they just, misused through the water departments. And so Palm Springs has this kind of like oxymoronical kind of underworld energy to it, and it kind of fits into the whole journey of the dead, Day of the Dead, and the road of the dead, even, right, which is to bring Hoffman back into the conversation. But you have the next slide. I don't know if we have enough time to get into the rest of your presentation, but I did see the next slide said Day of the Dead on it, so it's kind of funny, like Palm Springs has this super military connection. It was like the vacation spot for a lot of the top military leaders, and after the 60s it basically went to shit, and the water dried up, and now the place is, like Roman said, just a desert.
It is Palm Springs is undoubtedly and like that. I can't think of the desert, which it's like on the on the bottom side of that desert is where, like, you have Coachella, and it's where there's so much military industrial complex, pop culture industrial complex is all tied to this land. And very much so. So I was going to go and tell this crazy story in Florida, but if we've hit our
we got time.
Run it.
No, we want to hear.
We want to hear it, Mike. If we got time for you, if you got time.
Florida. I've been one time. I have family out in Kissimmee, and the second I touched down off the plane, I like felt spirit. Like I just felt vibes, because it's underwater, right? Like it's like below sea level, and you touch it and you're just like, I don't know what's happening here, but I liked it a lot. And so I would love to hear the Florida piece, please.
All right. So after that 33-day trip, then went up to Maine, continued like this. It's all this, like this very conscious, like as I'm calling it, the arrow circulation. Like that's what
arrows.
Here, I got to go check.
Arrows circulation.
I'm sorry.
Arrows circulation.
As in EROS.
Exactly. It's both.
Yeah.
It is the movement of vital energy. That's what EROS is vital energy. Like it's typically thought of in the most basic level, it's vital energy, and Eros is a wordplay on rose. Like there's a big Rosicrucian connection to Eros as well, and what the Rosicrucians are doing. But where I want to go with this is we then went down to Florida, and we were down for Florida for 72 days now. And so much like I could spend 10 hours just talking about the 33-day trip. But now I want to go and show how it shows up in Florida and in a different way. We began our trip in St. Petersburg. We had a house sitting gig for my sister, and she lives in St. Petersburg. And Florida, to your point, is like it is potent land. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at like the type of life and the type of energy that lives on Florida, like from the swamps and the storms, like there's an energy there that really isn't found anywhere else in at least the United States. And the peoples that live there, they were particularly the west coast of Florida near St. Petersburg. They were strong in the mound building tradition. St. Petersburg was known for its mounds. Here you see, before St. Petersburg was the Sunshine State, early promoters tested a less beachy moniker, the City of Mounds. You might be surprised to learn that the area was dotted with Native American mounds of all shapes and sizes. And one of the that's half the fun of coming to a new place, is like learning about its history, and looking at the native history, and particularly mound history, is always one of the markers which I begin to look at as well when I look at the deeper history, and to see that St. Petersburg was so deep with mounds. And it makes sense. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. My sister's neighborhood, we were there during the month of October. And nice. It's really kind of like, it's called Historic Northeast. And it's a fancy neighborhood. And all of the homes were built probably in the early 1900s, like 1920s, 1930s. And it looks very much like Beverly Hills, if you've ever seen that part of California, where like the lawns are perfectly manicured, the architecture is a certain way, the trees look a certain way. Very, very similar. And what struck me as so unusual was how much this neighborhood embraced Halloween, because we're there during the Halloween season. And because it was such a it's such a posh neighborhood, that it seems strange to me that this neighborhood would also be the most over the top with their Halloween decorations. But that's what they were. And what kind of made sense to me, like thinking about it, and I was like, well, and knowing about the mounds, I'm like, well, this is probably, this land was probably, there were quite a few burial mounds that were right here. And this is somehow how that energy is bleeding through the subconscious minds of the people who live there now. And they're expressing, that's basically what Halloween is it's a honoring of the dead, because it falls on Samhain, it falls on the Day of the Dead, it falls on this time of year which across culture has been understood to be when the veil between the living and the dead have been the thinnest. And so I'm like, okay, that would probably make sense why this community would be so Hollywood or Halloween focused. So here are just some articles. It's saying, but if you move to Old Northeast recently, perhaps you've heard some version of, about Halloween, right? Like it's that big of a deal. Like they write articles about how important in this neighborhood Halloween is. You look out and it's like a rock concert or a football game, something just wall or something, just wall-to-wall people. That's talking the actual day of Halloween. These are pictures of the past of just people flock to this neighborhood of where we were staying. And the reason I'm saying that is it became very evident to me that, you know, we're delving into this land which has a strong connection with the other side, if you will, with the ancestor realm. And I was there with my staying in my sister's house and so forth. And so here we could see some slides about, like, you know, the Day of the Dead. That's November 1st and 2nd. We could see All Hallowtide, All Souls Day. Like, these are all different sorts of recognitions of this October 31st, 1st of November is being a time in which the liminal or threshold, the boundary between this world and the other world are blurred. Like, this is Samhain, like this is all the same thing. And we find ourselves like in a very like death focused area. So pivot for a moment. As me as like just as a human being, as a child, as a young child, like I had toys like anyone else. And I had this set of blocks, like big heavy duty blocks, like stuff which I played with up until probably like 10 or 11. Like I'd use them to build racetracks or something along those lines. And on those blocks, these big wooden blocks, there was like hand-drawn graffiti. Like I just remember this one in particular. It said Moose Lives, but it was all of these markered drawings all over the blocks, and they were done by the original owner of the blocks. And the original owner of the blocks was mine and my sister's babysitter when I was like 1 to 2 years old, and my sister was a couple years older than me. Remember, I'm staying at my sister's place. And the person who owned these blocks, who was our babysitter, he was in high school. And he was like supposedly like this outstanding young man, an Eagle Scout, like quite literally an Eagle Scout. And he died a premature death.
No.
He died when he was in high school. He died like during the time that he was our babysitter. This was like when they gave us like some of the toys. And so I grew up knowing that I had my dead babysitter's toys. And I was always curious about that. And as I got older, like every once in a while, I'd think about that. I was like, you know, who was this guy? And like, I know like about how consciousness is built. And like, I have a curiosity about how things work. And I'm like, what does this mean to me? Like, you know, my experience and my connection with this guy. And I periodically throughout my adult life, I'd ask my family about him. And like, you know, there wasn't much information. All right. Pivot back to our story. Pivot back to our story, my friends.
Pivot.
So when we were in St. Petersburg for about 6 weeks. And one of the best things about being in Florida, particularly on the coastal Florida, is you have access to the water. And we had access to, we were close to the Gulf of Mexico. But for the most part, most of the beaches at like St. Petersburg Beach and all of those were just too commercial. They were not our flavor of beach. But we found this amazing place to go to the beach. It was called Fort DeSoto Park. And this is where it is. So St. Petersburg is on Tampa Bay, the same bay which the city of Tampa is on. This is an enormous body of water. I don't know what the distance is from here there. It's probably 5-6 miles at least, if not more. And as we said, this on St. Petersburg, this is a mound area, and this is where most of the beaches are for people who go to the beach. But right here is where Fort DeSoto is, and the Fort DeSoto beaches are. And you can maybe see with this image that it was it's parkland. And this area here, this grouping of islands at the mouth of Tampa Bay are arguably the most strategic and important islands. Like if you could think of Tampa Bay as, when people lived, previous cultures lived here, like this mouth of the bay, like knowing who's coming in and out of the bay, like it's important to have like something right here, regardless of how you see your understanding of reality. This was very, very important land. And sure enough, here's the one lone mound historical marker, and it talks about a large Indian burial mound is found, the Tierra Verde Mound. It was actually a mound structure, and it was where the ceremonial and the highest concentration of ceremonial and burial mounds are found in this entire sort of St. Petersburg area.
Wow.
It would make sense because it's on these, right in this strategic location. This is the Theravada Mounds. We could see this is where Theravada is, but it's actually talking about this whole area. And this is the beach which we came to. And you can see this is what it looks like. This point right here is this point right here. And it juts out right into the bay. And this would be where we would like to go. And we would go there every time we'd go to the beach. We'd probably go to the beach like maybe 3 times a week at least. And we would always go right here. But one day in particular, we decided to go right here. And this is where the actual fort, of course, there was a military fort there. And we decided to go there. And we went there the day after Halloween. So we are right in the middle of that liminal space of when the veil is the thinnest in this seemingly most concentrated or most significant, like O2, like all of the mounds have been taken away and they put condominiums on top of them. And we find ourselves in this land. And I'm staying at my sister's house, and I just saw my parents who also live in Florida. So this is where the story begins. I was all set up. We go here for this one day. We've been coming to this beach this whole time. The very first time we come here, and what they have there is they have a snack bar. And we go in the snack bar and we get ourselves an ice cream. And for the most part, that's the other place I check out every place I go, Mark, is I check out every creamery. I like to go to ice cream places. I like ice cream. And I have a really high bar for what I think good ice cream is. So I go here and they have Hershey's ice cream. And in my high bar judgmental ice cream world, I would say Hershey's is kind of low on the list. But Hershey's is named after Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is right where I live, right by Harrisburg. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. So I start this conversation with the old timer who's working. Imagine the sort of person who's working in this concession stand. He's like a retiree. He's like 70 years old. And he's filling his time working here. And I say to him, just to start conversation, I'm like, we're from Hershey, Pennsylvania, which wasn't exactly true. We're from outside of Hershey. But anyway, he's like, well, that's interesting. He's like, I'm not from Hershey, but I used to live near Hershey. I lived in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm like, oh, well, actually, I live near Hershey, but I grew up outside of Baltimore. I grew up outside of Baltimore, in a town called Columbia, Maryland. He's like, oh yeah, Columbia, Maryland. My aunt, she was one of the early adopters, one of the first people to move in Columbia, Maryland. And she used to live on Farewell Road. I remember she lived on Farewell Road. Mind you, Columbia's it's a big area. In the early days, it wasn't as big as it is today, but there are a lot of roads there. And so I tell the guy, I'm like, wow, that's interesting, because I was born in Farewell Road. That was the house where I grew up, or my first 3 years before we moved to Richmond, before we moved back to Columbia. He's like, yeah, I had an aunt. Her name was Betty Jones. And I'm like, huh. What? I know Betty Jones. I don't remember living on Farewell Road, but I know my parents have mentioned Betty Jones before. And then he says to me, he's like, it was a real shame because Betty Jones, her son, who was my cousin, he died when he was in high school. I'm like, what do you mean? He died when he was like, yeah, he died in a car crash. And his name was, I forget what the guy's name was. So as you can go and see, I wasn't certain at the time of the conversation, but here are the screenshots between me and my sister, which happened right afterwards. And my sister confirms that Betty Jones was our next door neighbor, and it was her son, that man's cousin, who was the dead babysitter, who I have spent so much of my adult life having curiosity about. Not only is that a spectacular synchronicity, but it happened on the Day of the Dead in my sister's house at the location of the burial ceremonial mounds.
Wow. Wow.
All right, but we're almost done. That was the first half. This is where I need to
That's
go
crazy.
and wrap this whole thing up. So that happens. Whole bunch of stuff happened throughout the entire trip to Florida. All these different events. Like these are all the different places we stayed. We went here. We met up with Greg Carlwood at an event called Path to Freedom. Mike Winter from Alpha Vedic was there. Alex Zek was there. All these podcasters were there. It was a great time. But the second most significant event, like I would say that was my most memorable event of what happened in Florida. The second most memorable event happened when we went from the West Coast to Florida, and we were here in Palm City in early December, and we were there on my birthday. And Christy, she surprised, like came up with a birthday plan for me, like I planned out the day for you. And what her surprise trip for me was, she took me to Blind Creek Beach, which is one of the few clothing optional beaches in Florida. Because I love nude beaches, and I was very excited to go to it. So the story of the nude beach was like the reason why it's so memorable, because this one is just funny. So we're at a nude beach. It's in Florida. It's I like going to nude beach for like a variety of reasons. Probably the reason why everyone likes to go to the nude beach. There's something immensely freeing about like being in public around people and having no clothes on, and just like what that does psychologically to hide nothing. But then I also like to look at naked bodies. And so
swimming naked is like just that little bit of fabric that's blocking your water from you makes a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Being in the ocean, just like, oh, glorious. Truly optimized all the minerals you can osmosologically absorb. Please continue.
So we go to the beach, and for the most part, because it's Florida, like everyone's like 70, 80 years old on the beach. Just fine. Like because I'm not just there to like look at everybody else, but like because there's like the deeper reason. That's like just to add a benefit. So I happened to then notice, after being there for a couple of hours, like I see that this woman, probably like maybe like 40 years old, 30 years old, she's nearby. I'm like, finally, like someone who's kind of young. And it's like from behind, she looked like, I wanted to check her out. And so this is like happening in my mind. It's, I'm having like a real experience, but I'm just aware of what's going on. And then finally, the woman stands up, and it's like my opportunity, because she was sitting down. I could only see her sitting down. I could see her shoulders and her hair and so forth, at the back of her head. And she stands up, and she turns around, and we make eye contact. And then I notice that she has an enormous penis. And it was like straight out of a movie. It was like my first like nude beach tranny experience. And like this whole thing of like checking out this woman. And then like, it was a dude, like, it was like a human being born with a penis who now has breasts. Like, it was a tranny. And it was the funniest friggin' thing because I spent like 10 minutes checking her out, and I fell into this whole sort of like cultural mythological trope of like checking out like what you think is a woman, and it's like, it's not exactly the type of woman you think it was. So it just became like it became the second most noteworthy event of my experience. Like, when I cataloged like what happened, I'm like, the thing at the beach in Fort DeSoto, that was really, really interesting for this reason. And then that nude beach thing, it was so funny. Like, I was laughing at myself for the whole time, or for the remainder of my trip in Florida. So this is why I'm telling you the story. All right.
That's wild.
So within Mike's history, what kicked him off into like this nomadic lifestyle began with this with a fateful evening with a Freemasonic presentation, and then after that, everything fell apart. And shortly after my Freemasonic presentation, this car pulled up in front of me on the road, and the license plate of the car is MW57. And without getting into the details, the number 57 was immensely connected to that Freemasonic presentation. And so to see my initials, MW and 57, pull up in front of me with a Punisher sticker, an Air Force license plate, and a 5-pointed star right here, as I'm like in the real depths of the fallout of this Freemasonic event. Like, this was always like something that really weighed into me for someone who pays attention to the feedback of life. And what I've always been curious about, like, this made sense and all of these things made sense. And I'm like, well, if everything is meaningful on this car, then what does Sebring, the make and model of the car, what is that about? All right. So right here is a map of Florida. Right here is, this endpoint is Fort DeSoto, like exactly Fort DeSoto. And right here is exactly where that Blind Creek beach is. Like, I put those points exactly there. You could see that right here. And if you look, it crosses over exactly in the midpoint, this town called Sebring. I've been wondering for 2 years, what's the significance of Sebring? Like, it's just a question in the back of my mind. And then I have these two events, which I knew were very meaningful. You can see this is where I put one side, Blind Creek. This is where I put the other side, Fort DeSoto. And we see that it's 153.4 miles. You divide that in half and you get 76.7 miles. And we see the midpoint is exactly 76.7. Like, this is Sebring. And the Chrysler Sebring was literally named for Sebring, Florida. So when you dig a little bit deeper, you see that Sebring, Florida was actually once an Air Force base. And if you go even deeper, we've got the Air Force right here. You go even deeper, there's definitely Men in Black Air Force connection. But the point I'm just trying to make is this is just one more example of this real feedback loop, which you get from reality in every sense of the word, like in playful ways, in meaningful ways. Like, if you're paying attention, there's a communication. Now, I'm not quite certain what the Sebring significance is yet, but it took me a bit of time before I came to where I reached with the significance with the Mike Wann and the feather.
One thing I'll point out is the Sebring emblem, or logo, if you will, has wings. So there's some feathers right there. It's like a winged sigil. But wow.
Yeah, and it's not going to be your last time in Florida visiting where your major family lives.
Oh, so I'll probably go check it out.
Yeah. And be sure to have, I mean, Florida is just like that. You know, I remember when I went to Florida, I've only been one time, and it was just, I kept having streamlined thoughts. I remember making like a bunch of back-to-back videos where I just like almost couldn't stop talking. And I was just, that's when I was enthralled, like, and talking about things like in a fluent manner where I was surprised. I was like, what am I saying right now? I love it. What is happening? And it's just like something about being like underwater, like, you know, like the water's higher around you than it is on the land, and you're completely level with the ocean, and you have like just so many humans. I remember them saying there was 1,000 people a week that moved to Orlando, you know, and they were saying that for the past decade, you know, and I'm sure they were saying it before and they're continuing to say it. A lot of conscious energy, like a lot of bodies, and that body's stacking up and it already, like, you know, magnetically heated place. It's like you can just flow left and right if you're really tapping into it like that, man. And wow, that is beautiful. I love it. You are the master synchro mysticist I've ever met. That's actually connected dots on the road, being able to like pull the threads like that in such a way. It's so tasty, like a nicely layered croissant, fresh out of the oven, my friend.
My sense is like
Poetry.
And this goes back to, I mentioned the river and stars ceremony. Like to me, like synchro mysticism is like, it's not a parlor trick. It is like a very, and it's not even just about meaningfulness, like as much as it is like, this is, I don't want to say but maybe a way. And what we're talking about is being able to move through this time. And if a human being is being honest with themselves, like if you were born in culture, if you went to school, like your inner world has been shaped by the system, which we're trying to be able to maybe move for those of us who recognize that this is a direction they don't want to go to, because a whole bunch of people want to go this direction. They the practice of the river and star ceremony is literally the proper orientating oneself in consciousness and physical body to be able to look at something, like literally to understand where they are, to be able to know where the heavens are, the ecliptic as it relates to like the horizon, know a little bit about your history, so that then as you are moving through life, you are having your connection firmly grounded in consciousness and understanding like what's going on, and then also physically. And when that happens, like this sort of feedback is the natural way. And what is that feedback? It's just like what you're saying. It's like it's as good as a good croissant. Like you do feel nourished by life. You feel nourished. So there's two ways of feeling nourished by life, I suppose. Like one is like your nourishment in the body, and then the other part is nourished on your life journey. And those are hopefully both would be nourished. But this is the way which you get that nourishment in, like, this is what life's about. Like life is an experience, and I am an active participant. And I am participating with the outer world, and it is not me looking at it from separate, but realizing that we are doing it together. And then that is built into how we are meant to be experiencing it, which will then move us through this time. So, yeah.
And I think a key part too is, like sharing the memories that come up too. Like, Sebring was one of my favorite cars that I crashed before before we met and started our own synchro mystic journeys. That was a synchronicity.
Interesting.
But
Well, yeah, I
The
think
wings.
it's well said, Mike, and I'm glad you took us on this journey. I appreciate you preparing a really excellent presentation. And I mean, Florida, we're only just scratching the surface of all the amazing things going on down there. I think Roman has a
That's
point.
what Dr. Longo's for.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I mean, maybe we'll have Dr. Longo on this show. Folks, reach out to Dr. Longo. Tell him that you'd like to see him on the Esoteric America podcast. But yeah, Mike, thank you so much, man. Great work. Any final closing thoughts from yourself or anyone?
can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm like, I always wonder, how do you like staying in, because researching is definitely not my strong suit at all. But I wonder how you stay in one place and find the synchro mystic touchstones and then string them together by like staying in one place, because you've been traveling all over the place, but we just live in one town right now. So,
Well, I started doing this just living in one town. Like when I did like all the Susquehanna mystery.
yeah,
And I think that it's like,
right.
it's an approach with life.
Yeah.
It's, if anything, it's much more difficult to do it on the road. Like
My
the
experience
more
is the
you-
opposite.
I'm
But
sorry.
for me, it's been more difficult, like living that in one place. But
Well, I meant the research is more difficult to do on the road.
oh. But it's true, because we just moved up to New Hartford, so we live next to the Farmington River now. So that would be a good place to start too for us together doing research. But
Yeah.
right,
Yeah, and you go and you look like you just
start with
easy.
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia is your friend. Like they'll have like some strange sentence, then you just follow that sentence and like, look at the history.
Right on. Well, cool. Mike, this has been excellent. I really appreciate it. And we started in Harrisburg. We ended up in Florida. I think this is a great example of what can be achieved when exploring this esoteric America. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. You asked me for final words. Yes, like I think that this is an amazing platform. Like when you first told me about this, like what I saw in this show, which you what I don't think I did not do what I think the show is meant to do. I did something else. But what occurred to me and what excited me about the show is it's providing a platform for people to go and do their own research on their neighborhood, on like where they live. And that should be done for its own sake, because that will begin like the process of getting linked to your hometown. But usually when you go and you do this research, like you're going to want to share it. And not everyone wants to hear it. Like, so to have a place like this where people can come and be, there's a really, really important part in this equation, which is called the importance of the witness. And so for people to go and demonstrate what they've learned and have a witness, like feedback, other eyes and minds and consciousness, which is place to put it, that's how the feedback loop begins. And I think this is an amazingly important platform. And if anyone's watching this and they have not started to look into their own hometown, and then 2 have not reached out and said like, hey, Mark and Roman, let me come on, and Tara, let me come on your show and let me show you what I got, like in this real kind of like easy way. Like the expectation should be maybe kind of low, like, you know, do your best work, but like this is an opportunity where all of this thought can begin to be expressed, witnessed, and then what will come out of it is probably beyond than what we can see, what we can imagine.
Well said. Yeah, that is the goal. And folks, don't be shy. Reach out to us. The bar has been set where it's at, and use this episode and the previous episodes as an example of at least what format to follow in your looking for different research, you know, whether it's Wikipedia or exploring on foot, by car. Get out there, find out what's going on, and report back to us, because we'd love to have you here on Esoteric America. And that's about it for me. Roman, Tara, any final thoughts? Mike, I think that was really well said. Any final thoughts
you,
from
Mike,
both
for
of you?
that, because we love the show, and it's been really cool to talk to so many people who have never been on a podcast before, but they just have their eyes open. They're starting to peel back some of the layers of, you know, truly identifying what place they're, you know, serving, what purpose they're serving in whatever area it is. Like when they come onto the show and express these things, it's them just like you said, it's like, it's a great place for that. Like we love to hear any stories at all about what you have found, what you've experienced, anything. It's like really amazing. And it's enlightening for us to be able to be here, hold that space for you guys, and just to allow this, you know, freedom of flow of whatever it is that you found and whatever it is you find fascinating, whatever type of weird rabbit holes you go down. Like that is amazing. And so like, thank you, Mike, yet again. And you know, until next time, because I'm so excited to hear what other stories unravel and follow you along the journey, brother. And you know, Forrest Gump, I got to give that one a watch. My favorite takeaways from this one was mystical toponymy. That is a phrase in which I have a couple theories of my own that now I get to like add to the cake. So thank you for the mystical toponymy. That was a gosh dang golden egg. And but yeah, brother, it's an honor and a pleasure. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Cool.
Until the next time.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
All right. And folks, thanks for tuning in. Follow up with Mike. The link tree to get in touch with him and follow up on everything he's doing is linked in the description. So go there. And until next time, happy trails exploring this esoteric America.